Good morning. Welcome. Appreciate you coming to this class. My name is Nigel. Thank you. I want to thank Laserfiche for inviting us here today to present this class. My part in this is just a little background, and then I'm not going to bore you any longer and let you get to the heart of this class with the Laserfiche administrators we have sitting here to my right. So you can appreciate what we've accomplished at Tarrant County College. The college is a 50-year institution of higher learning in Tarrant County, Texas, and Fort Worth. And up until about 8 years ago, they didn't have a records management department. I was hired 8 years ago. We started out with a staff of 1. We had no facilities, no programs, no services to provide. We had a clean slate of paper, basically, to start from. So in the 8 years, we have acquired 8 employees now. We have 2 archives that manages our construction and building plans. We have another archives for the permanent and historical records of the college. And we have a record center now for inactive records to store them. We provide services of records storage, retention, and disposal. 3 years ago, or nearly 3 years ago, we bought Laserfiche. And we began to take the college out of, in a sense, the Stone Age, the paper age, into the electronic age. At first, it was a challenge because some people wanted to resist, but now they've embraced the technology and we're moving along. We're doing it one department at a time, starting with student records, which we're going to talk about today some. And then now our current project is HR with personnel files. What was I going to say other than that? Excuse me. Basically, like I said, the college is 50 years old, but in 8 years' time, we've gone from nothing to a program that's legitimate. Laserfiche, again, is going to take us out of the Stone Age in terms of paper records and managing the content. We're implementing the records management component of Laserfiche so we can apply retention to the records. And we're doing it, again, one department at a time. Today, Ramon and Carol are going to discuss what we've done to help our veteran students to process their paperwork, to apply for their VA benefits, to apply for financing their schooling. Carol will also touch on the importance of training. You can build the best Laserfiche system and process in the world, but if you don't have good training and reach out and provide the service to your end users, you're wasting your time because they're not going to use it. You have to simplify and provide them, the end user, what they need so that they can do their job better. And it's a bit of a selling process. You've got to get them out of their comfort zone and willing to do something new. But we've been very fortunate at the college in the last few years. Many people have been hired that, in a sense, get technology and they've embraced the Laserfiche system. So enough of that about the college and our department and what we've accomplished. I'm going to turn it over now to Ramon, and he's going to discuss with you the process that you're here to see today. Ramon?
All right, let me first catch up and get to the actual slides that we're looking at. He kind of summarized it and didn't need to use the slides. So my name, like Nigel said, my name is Ramon. I was the lead admin for our system. Before I actually go into how we use Laserfiche, I wanted to kind of give you an overview of some of the prerequisites you need to do before we actually implemented this system. And one of the main things that we wanted to do was we wanted to separate what the end user wanted before what they actually needed. And this is usually a common occurrence, is that a end user will come and ask a service or ask something to be done, but they'll give you a lot of suggestions that aren't necessarily required. You'll notice that sometimes they'll request template fields or things that don't really occur day to day in their business process. So real quick, I wanted to just identify some of the document types that they're working for, and some of these might not be apparent to you, but it's a decent, substantial size of document types that we're working with, and this is how they basically identify what students, different document types these students need in order for them to get their funding. But I'll go to the next slide. Part of that is actually identifying the 5 W's and 1 H. I'm sure y'all are familiar with this, but identifying who is actually going to benefit from this directly. What the purpose of the project is. Now, our purpose of the project was, making it more efficient for veterans. It was a very paper process. It took a lot of time. But we also wanted to identify, when does this need to be completed? Because, you have to have a rigid timeline on when the project needs to be completed. It's important to have small goals and set timelines over the project before it's actually you complete the project. Where the project was going to be implemented, we usually go one department at a time. Our veterans department is actually located inside of our registrar's offices. So that was where our department was involved. But so why do they really need this? And like I said before, they really needed this because they were working exclusively with paper. The registrars were heavily involved in the actual process, and it just wasn't very efficient. And that also kind of ties in on how it helps the department. Now, if you can go, well, yeah, right, user acceptance. Identifying some of the roadblocks with this is, Nigel had touched on this, is the user acceptance. A lot of the higher up are stuck in certain ways of doing a process. They don't see the need of having to change something that to them already works. So one way to get past this is actually communicating the ROI possibilities or your return on investment. And really that comes from the saving the space of actually storing these physical documents and allowing employees to do other tasks by freeing up their time. But part of this is also instilling best practice standards. A lot of the times they don't have very good standards as far as image quality or metadata values. And we use this metadata values to really identify the document types that they're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis. And this is kind of a manual workflow of how things were originally done. A student would come into their home campus, and this would normally be a campus where they're registering classes for. They would come in and they would speak to a VA rep, and that VA rep was in charge of collecting all the documents, making a folder for them basically, and basically just putting it in a filing cabinet, to be honest. It would sit there for a long time, and the process could take anywhere from three plus weeks before it actually made it to the registrar. The registrar was actually in charge of reviewing the documents and then saying whether or not they would be certified or not. If they were certified, then the process was fine. They would store it in a vault that we have on our separate campus. If it wasn't certified, or they were missing some kind of documentation, or they were enrolled in wrong courses, it would be sent back to the VA rep, and the process would basically start all over again. The main problem with this is that it was very stringent on the students. The students had to go to their specific campus. The way we got around that with Laserfiche was that we were actually able to have Laserfiche monitor our network drives. And a student could then submit their documentation either via email or via our student information system. We use Ellucian Colleague or Ellucian. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those. But they could actually submit their documentation that way. Or, you know, if they still wanted to come in, they could do that as well. They could also email it to the actual VA rep. And what this was able to do is it was able to relieve them from having to, relieve them from having to actually show up. A lot of the VA students, they have, you know, their time is really important to them. So relieving them from having to show up to the campus was really important. We were also able to take away the registrar certification duties from the registrar. Each registrar on each campus had to certify each student. So when peak times were coming, there would be a big flow of students wanting to be registered, and you know, it took a lot of time for them to go to each individually. We had 2 employees on each campus. We have 5 campuses. And we were able to consolidate that into 3 full-time positions located in a central location, and all the documents were then sent to them and they could do their own process. It was important for us to have the actual metadata associated with these document types, and this is the VA properties template that we use for all of our student records. You'll notice that we have a colleague ID field at the top, and this is what basically makes all of our filing work. As I said before, we use the Ellucian Colleague system, and basically a imager will take the document and scan it into our repository and enter in a colleague ID. This is a unique identifier for their student. It has all their student information in it. And with that, we're able to query our database off of a colleague, either using their colleague ID or their social security number. And we can then fill out the rest of their information, which we will then use for searching or indexing. We also have a VA required checklist and documents checklist. That checklist is encompassed, I showed a slide earlier of all those document types. They can, a VA rep can then select which document types are in a in a student file. So that file could consist of 50 pages or 10 pages. It really just depends on what kind of documentation the VA needs. The good thing about having this checklist and being able to have a list field value with this is that it's good for reporting and searching capabilities. A lot of the times we'll see that VA reps will need to make a report, and that report might encompass all students that are missing certain documentation, or a registrar might need a report for all students that haven't been certified yet or waiting to be certified. So that's really where that field comes in handy. Now here's the actual folder structure. It's a cutout basically of the folder structure. The VA reps usually are encompassed in these 3 or 4 main folders right here. Whenever a file is scanned on the campus level, a workflow is what initiates and basically assigns metadata, student information to that file, makes I guess you would call a packet for that student, and then moves it to the awaiting verification folder. This is where our VA reps usually spend most of their time. We assigned extra field values at this point so that they can separate out what files are either missing some kind of data that could be they're missing a specific document. Sometimes students will enroll and request benefits, but they haven't actually been enrolled in a specific class. They can still submit their work, but technically they're not ready to be certified. So if that's the case, they will then change a field value that will move it into the not enrolled folder. Once everything is complete, though, they have all their documentation, and they are enrolled and everything looks good, then that's when they will actually say that they're ready for certification. And at that point, it will move to the cleared for certification folder. At any point in time, if they want to specifically take a file and move it into their own folder, let's say they just want to separate it from that, they can actually just drag it into their VA reps folder. We have a folder that's basically, since they're all using Windows authentication, we can pull their first and last name and then dynamically create a folder for that VA rep. So that's also, that was one of the things where that was more of a want kind of thing, but we felt that it was good enough for them to have. This is our actual student records folder. You'll notice that it's a A through Z format. It's a little small, I apologize, but we use a A through Z based on their last name, and this is also important as far as getting naming standards. You want, if any of y'all are familiar with the CPP courses for Laserfiche, they kind of touch on this as far as naming files, naming folders, and how your folder structure should be. So the way we use it is, we do a last name, comma, first name, and then you'll see those are actually colleague ID numbers right there. So if it's easily identifiable, and you'll kind of see the file name is also similar, where it has a first last name. But we also take the document type name as well and use that field to name the file as well. Now this slide is really just showing everything, all the tools that we use and the VA reps use. Like I said before, we have a workflow that basically automates storing the document and actually filing the document. We use quick fields for actually processing and retrieving files from the network drive. We do some, slight, when a document is saved into our network drive, it's saved based off of the colleague ID of that student. So we'll basically retrieve that 7-digit number and assign that metadata to the file before it's actually stored into Laserfiche. We'll do some OCRing with it as well, just for searching capabilities. We use Snapshot for our VA reps because they oftentimes will receive documentation via email. So having Snapshot is another tool that they can use to, instead of having to print out a document, they can, it's like a virtual printer that stores documents directly into Laserfiche and still has the same metadata capabilities of assigning templates and everything. We also do physical scanning of documents at each registrar's office. Students will still come into campuses to fill out documentation. So we have a small scanning location on each campus, and if need be, somebody can scan those physical documents in as well. We have one actual database server that stores everything on there, and I believe that's we use a Oracle database for our student information system as well. We also obviously use the Laserfiche client. not everybody uses it. This is mainly for the people that are actually physically scanning. So we'll have a station, one station, one station set up on each campus, basically. We do use web access sparingly. That's more for employees that rotate. We have some employees that rotate different campuses, so this allows them to be able to still have the capabilities of the client without specifically having to have it installed on that physical computer. The thing that we use the most is WebLink, and that's really because of the licensing capabilities of not having to designate a license to each person. Everybody at the registrar's office is able to access student documents immediately. Often students will come in requesting if transcripts have been turned in, anything like that. They're really at the point of access when they can just come up to there and ask if their documentation has been processed. And it really helps the communication between the student and our system. We use some audit trailing, but that's more on our end for searching capabilities and identifying if documents have been misplaced. As I said before, we use the template very often as far as setting up metadata, and really that's how we store all of our documents and really have it structured. So total we have around 300 users, and that includes WebLink as well. And that's via the client, web access, and WebLink. So let me go to the next slide. And really now, that's all I have so far. I'm going to pass it on to Carol, because an important part of this is actually delivering the training to them. As Nigel had said before, if you don't actually give them the proper training, then you could make the best system, but if nobody will use it, basically. So it's a really important part of what we try to do. You ready? All right.
Thank you. Now you can see me. I need this at Tarrant County too. I have this problem. Well, I have the pleasure of training staff at Tarrant County College, which I enjoy immensely. I get to go all over the district. We have 5 campuses. Of course, being a college, I have great presentation stations and a good learning lab that I can have an environment to train them in and give them a real authentic experience. But what I do is a lot of analysis. We have a lot of business process meetings to start out with our people that we're working with when we implement. And as I listen to conversations, I take note of what things they might use with Laserfiche. And I really focus more on user things. I have completed the Laserfiche Specialist certified program training, which was very good, because it focuses on users, and that's what I want to be about, is how can I find the tools that Laserfiche has for the users. And Laserfiche has got a lot, so it's very important that they know what they have and how they can use it in their specific situation. Every situation is different. And you may have noticed that I have a master's degree in music, and so I'm creative. And that part of it really appeals to me, that I can be creative with this software. We try to figure out what, like Ramon said, what's going to be the best for them? WebLink, Web Access, or Laserfiche Client? Sometimes the client they have to use depending on what it is that they need to do, and we know right away, oh yeah, they're going to need client. WebLink has been awesome because I have trained advisors, counselors that have not had this tool for many, many years. They've had many, many documents that are around, but they don't have access to it. They have to go to they had to go to a secretary to get it printed out. Well, I have to tell you that when I got my master's degree, they told me, when you teach software, don't have a real strong opinion or make it a sales pitch. And so I'm sorry if I do that, but it just kind of naturally comes out. So then I'm researching the trainees also, because the people that come to the meetings are not always going to be all the users that you see. With WebLink, I do a WebLink class in a lab. It's very easy to use. But the great thing about it is I tell them what an enterprise content management system is, and part of that is it is a records management program. Therefore, I can segue into some records management training and sneak it in. Also, I have a lot of different environments that I use depending on the situation, which again is creative, and I like to play around with that. Hands-on lab is always great because if they actually do it, they are going to remember it better. So that really is optimal. However, if there are going to be scanning in a certain environment, I like to go to their environment. Sometimes it's kind of hairy because they've got a lot going on and people are still asking them questions, but it's a better simulation of what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be doing it. So I like to go to them. When I taught the VA scanners, they are scanning in the registrar. Behind the registrar are the student services desks. So I go and I sit with a small group and I'll train them right there on how to scan. They previously have had WebLink training, so when they go back to their desks, they're going to look up records on WebLink. And, but with a scanning station, they can share that license and share that computer. The other thing I love is WebEx, which is an online program like GoToMeeting. You may know what it is. And it's really great to teach client or web access because it's so easy to see things and demonstrate things. I like to do that with small groups, maybe 3. I used WebEx to train Laserfiche Client to the district VA representatives. That's the centralized group that is really working with the documents and using the workflow to process, move things around in that folder tree that Ramon showed you. So I did Laserfiche Client training with WebEx, and then I went to their office and I trained them scanning in their office. I do a lot of technical writing, and when we did the VA thing, we had a test version first. So I did test version documentation for that, and it's step-by-step instructions. And also, when we had the final version, I did documentation for that, and it's step-by-step things. And I write quick help sheets for things that I know they're going to use over and over again that they can just pull out and use. One thing about training that's great for me is that I can tell when there's true change management taking place, when they are embracing it, when they get excited and they go, oh, I can do this, or oh, I don't have to do this. It really is a great moment for me, and I like to bring that back to the team because I know they work so hard on their end of it. Also, I've noticed in WebLink class that it has sparked discussions through the training. That's one great thing about having a class or a group of people that you're working with, is that they all bounce ideas off each other, and you can see that the Laserfiche knowledge that they're getting and the applications that they're learning inspire them to collaborate, which doesn't always happen in the workplace. I give contacts for further help. Everybody in our department are just there to help people all the time, and I want them to know that. Our department is also very gifted. Ramon is very gifted. He is a gold certified Laserfiche specialist, or gold certified. He's gold certified. And I listen for concerns and questions that they have. If I can't answer them, then I get back with them. And if there's anything we can do to help them or change anything, you know, it's another way to get the process going. If I need to retrain, I certainly will. Now we'd like to take questions, if you have any questions.
My questions are more for the implementation side.
Yeah.
When you were implementing, did you find that it was easier to gather the information and have them part of the process, or was it easier for you to basically tell them what needed to be done? That's one of the challenges that I'm having, is trying to balance that with a few of my universities.
This one? Yeah, so that's a good question. That's actually part of the CPP course with the repository architect. And that's really identifying, getting specific needs from that client, but not necessarily having them dictate what you're going to do and how you're going to design everything. So it's a little, it's both, really. But if I were to lean one side or not, I would lean towards you telling them what it does and what you can do. Because what will end up happening most of the time is that they will give you too much information, and that can really bog down the process. Really what ends up happening is when they end up doing that, you start looking at small details instead of trying to get the whole overall goal of what the actual project is supposed to fix, basically. So yeah, if anything, I would tell them what it does, and not necessarily have them dictate it, but still have, in all of our meetings, we had them involved and basically gave them the tools on what it can do, and then told them, well, this is how we're going to use the tools, instead of having them tell you, well, can we use these tools this way or that way.
Let me add also, along with what he's saying, you want to let them know that you have their interest in mind. And yes, I mean, you can build a nice system, but if we're not going to use it, what's the point? You have to collect what I call do the records analysis and the business analysis, and acquire all the requirements, if you will, of the end user. What do you need? What's your process? And how can we improve on that? Not just convert it to electronic and have maybe 10 steps when maybe all it needs is 5 steps. You know, you simplify it. If you make their job easier and more efficient, they're not going to argue with that, obviously. You're trying to help them, and that's what you want them to hear loud and clear. And then they get off their defensive, and they get over their being scared to change, you know, from the way that they've always done it. And that's where Carol comes in, is saying, hey, I'll train you, I'll take you by the hand, and we'll get through this, you're going to be fine. And sometimes they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, when Ramon shows them, well, let me show you some possibilities here of what we can do. and you can show them some of the success that you've had in other departments with other processes, business processes. And then they get it all of a sudden. They go, oh, wow, I want that here in my department. It's a selling process too, but it sells itself. When they realize all I got to do is click a mouse and I can find the records I need. I've got a student on the phone and that needs an answer right then. You can provide it. With this VA process is really good. It improves operations, improves customer service. It's a win-win situation. It certainly makes it a lot easier for the student to apply without having to either mail the physical records or bring them in to a certain campus. They can email them if they want to. And the point is it gets into the system, and instead of having access to where the records are at that campus, they're available electronically district-wide on all of the campuses. Because students a lot of times will take classes on a couple of the campuses. So then they've got to transfer and get the paperwork brought over to the other campus so the other advisors can help them. So it really helps speed up the process considerably. And that's just a simple process, where we help students process their paperwork for admissions into the college. And that's a special group with the VA students. And so we've gained a lot of, not only success, but hooray about doing so, because we're helping those special students. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about, you said you were implementing HR department processes and how you're doing that and where you're starting?
Go ahead if you want to start.
Really, where we start off is we have to actually take an inventory of what records they have. A lot of the times what ends up happening is they say, well, we have these records, but we're not quite sure what's in their file. So really getting them to sit down and actually tell us specifically what document types do you have, what are you working with, and once you can identify what document types they have and the actual volume of documents they have, then we can actually start working on, well, how are we going to image all of these documents? Because a lot of times when we're working with HR, they have a very large amount of paper documents. So that might be something where you have to actually outsource and look for somebody else to come in and physically, at least at the beginning, image the file. So on our process, we had our vendor come in and just physically scan the documents. We had HR basically make sure that all the files were current, and they put a social security number of that employee on the file, and MCCI would basically come in and put slip sheets for each employee file with their social security number. And at that point, we could then query our database, because our employee files our employees are also on our same student information system. So we could then just take that social security number, query the database, and file it that way.
So are you talking about current files that you're scanning and then putting into Laserfiche?
Yeah, it's a two process where we had the backlog scanned into the system so they'd have access to the content. But going forward, obviously, we have to set up a process where the new content coming in is being brought into the Laserfiche and helping the end users to process and get that paperwork in. More times than not, they're not physically scanning the content in with a scanner. A lot of times they're pulling it, printing it, if you will, from an email. In other words, it's already electronic. All they got to do is route it into Laserfiche, and sometimes we can automate that process. So going forward, they're learning how to do business in a new way. We're trying to, like he said, the doc type list is insane in HR. They call it the personnel file. They actually have 3 files. They have employee relations files. They have the medical file, they call it, and then the personnel file or service record. And we're trying to, in a sense, whittle that down a little bit too, to make them realize, okay, you don't have to keep everything in the kitchen sink in the personnel file. What do you really need to do your job? You know, what do we need to capture here? Because now it's on them to scan the content in going forward. So that'll be an easy sell. They'll want to scan in less, obviously, and just put in what they need.
Are you developing electronic forms through Laserfiche for HR?
Yes.
Which ones are you working on?
Really, the first form we're starting with is the onboarding, and that's going to be actually when the employee file is made. So that will be, you know, them putting in their general information, bringing their filling out like a W-2, I-9s, things like that. What we did with that is that we basically embedded, you know, because you can't basically recreate a government form, but you can embed the form inside of the electronic form. So that's a way we're getting around that. But we make an entire, basically a hiring packet that HR does.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I kind of have a follow-up to that. What documents are you using, or what e-forms are you using for student records? And then I have another question after that.
For student records. And forms is really, we have another worker that does specifically forms. Unfortunately, he's not here today. As far as the student records go, the only actual form that we use is for credentialing, and that's still more on the HR side, but that would be for credentialing employees that are going to be teachers necessarily. So that, and what was the second question? Sorry.
Oh, I hadn't asked it yet, so you're
Okay.
good. What about the functionality of WebLink? We're about to implement and migrate a bunch of colleges, and so we're license managing right now.
Right.
Can you kind of describe the functionality of WebLink in
Right.
relations to student records?
Right. So the way we handled that, as far as the licensing, is that we have a public licensing, which basically means that it allows an unlimited amount of users to log in, as long as we basically use a Windows account. So we set them up on our actual on our system, and they're able to log in via their Windows account information. It saves as far as not having to give out licenses individually. And I think that's it's a per server, on a per server basis though. I believe you purchase a public portal, and that's for one server. So let's say you have your student records on one virtual server, then anybody logging into that server then would have access to those files, and this is read-only access, so they wouldn't be able to make any kind of changes or anything to that documentation. If you had multiple servers, the way we set it up is we have HR on a separate server, just in case we need to do any maintenance on one form. We tend to not want to have the repositories all on the same server. But in doing so, that can cause problems with WebLink and that public portal, because you'll need to have another public portal licensing for each server. So it'll depend on how you want to do it. You could have all the repositories on one server, and then if it's HR or student records, everybody would have access to that without requiring licensing. But it's really a maintenance issue at that point.
Okay, and then just, sorry.
I'm sorry. One other question or comment about forms is, there's some forms we use and create a process for helping to determine if a faculty member is qualified to teach a particular class. But there's also some forms we use in a process that's been semi-automated that, for faculty members to submit to the deans and upper management and say, hey, we would like to develop a new course, and here's the course details and that kind of thing. And that has sped up the process quite a bit for them to be able to do that too. So we've used forms for that.
Awesome. And then I just have a quick clarification. You mentioned earlier when you were discussing training that you had some individuals that were scanning, sharing a license. Can you elaborate on that? Do they just have a scanner-specific login? Because
Right. No. So what we do is we give a computer license. So you can actually license the device on a computer. What you would basically do is you could contact IS or something like that, and they usually have a computer name or an identifier for that computer. And on the back end, what you can do is then instead of registering a Windows account, you would register a device instead. So that then allows anybody that has a Windows account to log in, and then it automatically uses up that license.
awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
This is a little less Laserfiche, but more for yourself. Do you know what the university went through to form a records management department? Was there a disaster that happened or some incident? Because I've tried to push people in that direction, and starting a new department can be pretty challenging.
Yes, I would agree. If there was a major lawsuit or something, they didn't tell me. But, you know, the laws, I think the Records Act was passed in 1989, and they did what they had to do by 1990 to register with the state and say, yeah, we've started a records management program. It was on paper, and that's all they really did. They had somebody part-time that says, you've got the duties for doing the records management, and people would call them. But for the most part, the district employees were mending for themselves. When I came on board, they didn't have retention schedules. They stockpiled tons and tons of stuff, and a lot of it was convenience copies because they would keep a copy, then send a copy to the dean and to HR, whoever, you know. It was insane. And I finally put them to rest at ease and said, it's okay, you can legally throw this away. You don't have to keep all of this stuff, you know. They were out of room, and they had no record center at the time, and so they were just, you know, buying file cabinets and taking up expensive office space. It is challenging to start a new program like that, but the way you start to sell the program is provide services. I mean, provide boxes, help them destroy records, help them to inventory, take them by the hand. And you kind of go overboard there to win them over and get them at ease. And then as the years passed here in the last few years, now they call us. They're willing, they like what we provide for them. And then upper management has saw the value because we do monthly and quarterly reports that show, okay, we destroyed X amount of boxes of records this quarter. And it saved the college this amount in terms of storing and that kind of thing. We also put HR to ease. Ricardo was very much nervous about storing his inactive personnel files with us. Now he says, I'm glad we did because we're out of space, but yet he was still the custodian of those records and had ready access to them. You know, the paper records. Now that it's in Laserfiche, it's even better. You know, so, but yeah, you just got to sell the program and you got to show them, you know what you're doing. I went to other colleges, you know, like Dallas Community College and Austin to compare notes when I walked in the door. And they were blown away when I told them we didn't have anything. They had records management departments with 8 to 12 employees for nearly 20 years. And they had record centers, they had programs. And when I told them I literally didn't have a retention schedule and had a secretary, they were blown away. You know, so we had a lot of catching up to do this last 8 years. And we're still doing so, but Laserfiche is going to put us in a, you know, in a high gear, obviously. So hopefully that answered your question.
Do we have more questions? Well, the speakers will be available after this session, and because there are 30 minutes between this session and the beginning of next one. So feel free to come up and ask more questions. Let's give them another round of applause for the team from Tarrant County Community College District. Thank you. And
One other thing I wanted to mention too, we've been blessed with Laserfiche has been great because they're very supportive and you get plenty of help in being successful by end users and with Laserfiche, technicians. So we certainly want to pass that on. If there's anyone here that needs to contact us and ask more questions or need help getting something started, by all means, give us a call. We'll be glad to help.
That's awesome. Thank you. And if you're interested in learning more about how our customers in education using forms, come back at 11 in this room. We'll be featuring Edgewood Independent School District, who implemented more than 200 electronic forms in 1 year for the entire district. So come back at 11. Thank you.